Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Kelly Fuller. I'm the Vice President of Workforce and Workplace Innovation here at the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. And we're always so excited to welcome you to these conversations with our friends at AHOLA, where we dig deep on topics that are important to employers when it comes especially to the people that work for all of us. So today, Tina and James are going to walk us through attract and retain, or building a culture that employees won't leave. We know that relationship with a job seeker who could become an employee begins when they first see a job posting about your organization. So the opportunity to create a culture begins even before someone walks in the door. Today, we're going to spend some time together hearing a presentation from Tina and James. We'll have some time at the end, about 10 minutes on the backside of this conversation, to talk about questions, comments that you may have, but please feel free to pop those into the chat as we go along. Super excited for this topic. I think it's one that we all can learn about best practices and how we attract people, bring them on board with attention, and really spend time with them while they're working with us so that we can create a culture that people don't want to leave. So I'm going to turn it over to the two of you now, Tina and James, to take us through. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for the introduction. Again, my name is James Turner. I go by JT. By the looks of the list of the people here in the meeting, I feel like I've run into a lot of you or spoken to some of you. So, welcome to our webinar this morning. I am one of the consultants here for the Ahola Corporation. Been here for about 3 years. Actually, it'll be 3 years here at the beginning of January in 2026. And I work solely with the Central Ohio region with for small to mid-sized businesses for payroll and HR services. And I'm joined by Tina Stewart McGinty, one of our proactive and our human resource consultants internally in our Brecksville office. A little bit of a background about Ahola. Tina, you can go to the next slide. As we are a family-owned company, again, based here in Ohio. So we are a local provider, and we are the longest-standing family-owned payroll service provider in the country. I know the slide says we are over 55 years of service, but we have just recently celebrated 58 years of service as of the end of August this year. So we've processed over 60,000 payrolls annually, transmitting about $4 million in ACH funds. And we offer services from the full service from hire to retire of an employee. And what you're going to hear today is a lot about the HR services, the HR experience, and the employee experience, which can be so important to a business owner and a business's success. We also do offer a HR service, which I'll talk about more at the end of our presentation today, the service that does not need to be coupled with our payroll. Tina, you can go to the next slide. All right, so our agenda today, again, we will hit on what is the employee experience on a day-to-day matter? Why does it matter? Employer challenges from the top down, ways to improve the employee experience, as well as measuring the employee experience as well. Next slide. All right. What are we talking about when we say the employee experience? A definition vary depending on who you ask, but things that impact that experience would be the trust amongst employee to the employer, communication amongst both parties, growth opportunities, getting into a company or into a business at an entry level, and what are the chances or opportunities you have to get to a promotion or get to a higher level of management and or executive leadership. Fairness, your interaction amongst your managers, your employees, the support, and possibly most important is going to be the culture that is involved at the business that you run. All right. And why you should care before Tina takes over. The employee experiences and perceptions can have pros and cons when it comes to the positive and negative effects, right? So high engagement is a good employee experience, and they have numerous benefits. Competitive advantage, higher employee retention, which we understand in today's market is very, very tough to have. If you include a great benefits package, for example, that is a great way to have that in place. And then you increase motivation and productivity. Now, negative experiences can also have a adverse effect. So employees talk to other coworkers when certain things at work happen. They have a negative impact on morale. former employees may write reviews online. We've seen Glassdoor.com, and you can see all different reviews from prior employees. Decrease productivity and engagement, and then also it adds frustration. So here I'll be kicking it over to Tina Stewart McGinty, and she will take it from here.
Thanks, JT. So just to kind of reiterate some of what JT covered here. So again, the reason this is also important is because as a business, it's going to impact your bottom line in some regard, right? So the higher your engagement, the higher your employee satisfaction, your employee experience. Again, these people are going to be excited to come to work. They're going to be excited to tell friends and family to come work there as well. So you're going to have better people, more quality candidates that are coming in just organically from word of mouth. Again, you're going to have that higher productivity because people are going to be showing up. They're going to be excited to work. They're going to feel valued and that they're adding to the organization. Versus when they have those negative experiences, that's when we see those trends like quiet quitting, where people are just doing the bare minimum just to get by. They're just skirting by. They're not being innovative and trying to kind of grow the organization. So again, we'll get into some strategies here soon. So although JT mentioned that the employee experience is rather loosely defined, it does have a lot of correlations to other work climate measures that we kind of want to talk about. So the employee experience and employee engagement are both really reliable predictors of job satisfaction. So employee experience influences about 49% of all job satisfaction, according to a SHRM survey. The other 51% of that is being made up by the employee engagement. So we'll talk some more about that here as well. But what are some challenges, right? So small organizations have a unique challenge that they might have to kind of overcome as compared to a larger organization, right? If someone has, 500 plus employees, they're not going to necessarily have the same challenges around their employee experience as a smaller organization with 10, 15, 20, 30. So taking a look at that, limited resources, of course. So you're not going to have the same type of budget. You're probably not going to have the same staff capacity. So that means you're not investing as much into maybe formalized programs around employee experience and engagement. But also you probably don't have the staff that's able to dedicate the time to run those programs as well. So that's the one piece of it. But retention struggles play into that as well. If you're a smaller, leaner organization, it's going to be more challenging whenever somebody leaves. So you have somebody that leaves the organization, and that stress is going to be felt across the team, across the organization, again, where you might not feel that stress as much. If you're working in a corporation that has 500 people and someone leaves, that's not as stressful as if you've only got a 10-person organization or maybe a 3-person team. So that's definitely one that can really have an impact as well. The next one would be no formal processes. So this could be policies, this could be your onboarding program, this could be a career development program. If there's not consistency, then people are going to have uneven experiences, and that in and of itself can cause frustration. So an example of this could be if you do not have an attendance policy. So the manager of this group is treating attendance in one way. Maybe people come in, up to 10 minutes late, no big deal. They just kind of let it roll. But you've got a manager over here that takes attendance very seriously. And so anytime somebody's even a few minutes late, he's writing people up. So you're going to have some conflict there because people are not being treated consistently. But the issue is that there's no formal process, there's no formal policy for them to even align to begin with. But people do not like those types of inconsistencies in the workplace if someone's being disciplined and somebody else isn't. So even something as simple as that can cause frustration within your organization. The next one would be communication gaps. So it's easy for people to assume in smaller teams and smaller companies that communication is just happening organically, that everybody's getting the information that they need, and nothing could be further from the truth. So really taking the time to make sure that those communication gaps are being addressed, not just in your day-to-day operations, but even when it goes back to setting expectations for your employees. So if expectations are not being set for employees on how to behave, how to perform, maybe their business metrics or productivity that they're supposed to be hitting, then they don't know that they're not hitting the mark, right? And so a lot of that frustration around that can be alleviated just by having regular conversations with employees about what those expectations are and what you want out of them in the workplace so that you can kind of come up with that agreement and understanding what needs to be taking place. Another challenge is just flexibility versus business needs. So trying to find that balance, right? We're all aware that, with COVID, there was a lot of hybrid, a lot of remote work, a lot of organizations are calling people back. So that's one thing that kind of can sometimes add struggle to employees who maybe don't want to come back full time. But as a smaller organization, you might not even be able to allow that flexibility. Maybe you want to, but just the way your business is, you can't allow it. You might not be able to tell people that they can flex their time and come in later and work later, or that they can work some of those days remote. But the other challenge is you might be able to allow that for some people in your organization and not others. And that in and of itself can also cause frustrations if this group of employees is allowed to work remotely, but then you have people that need to be there physically, like maybe a receptionist, or maybe a janitor, right? Those are jobs that can't be done remotely. And so some of those discrepancies can cause some of that angst amongst employees as well. Fewer growth opportunities. If you have a flatter organization with fewer roles that are available, there's not going to be a lot of organic opportunity for people to be promoted to the next level or see a lot of advancement. So sometimes people feel stuck. So there are some other ways, and we can talk about how we can work through that. But that is another reason that, again, something that a smaller organization might find more challenging than a larger organization that has more levels within the company. Culture impact. So this is a big one. And I know both Kelly and JT already kind of talked on this a little bit, but it's really astonishing how one or two people can have a toxicity within your organization that just kind of bleeds through. So I had the pleasure of attending an HR conference last week, and in one of the larger sessions that I participated in, the presenter actually asked the group of HR professionals, have you ever seen it that a person is either terminated from a company or leaves a company and your morale actually goes up? And almost everybody in that room raised their hand, because sometimes there is just that one person that's kind of infiltrating your organization in a negative way. And then finally, things are hard to measure. If you're a smaller company, you might not have a lot of platforms or a lot of formal feedback systems, right? Because sometimes, if you're trying to do surveys, you have to purchase programs for that. Sometimes that can be costly. Or smaller organizations, I find with some of my clients, just aren't tracking any type of HR metrics at all. And that can be problematic because then you're not going to be able to see where the trends are and where you should be getting feedback from your employees.
Yeah, I think before we go on, Tina, I think the culture impact, I think it's not able to be hit on enough when you talk about the effect it has on a business, and they can be very small things. And an example I like to use is just to share with everyone here, if people who haven't talked to me before. I recently was my wife and I had our first child earlier this year, and it's never surprising to me that when I speak to Tina, who, although we work together, we don't see each other every day because she's in Brecksville. But the first question that comes out of a lot of my coworkers' mouth is, "Oh, how's the newborn baby? How's your baby boy doing?" And it's those little things that can really make a difference in an employee's experience with work, treating you not just as a number within a company, but also as as a colleague, as a human being who actually is going through other life experiences as well. So those types of cultural impacts really do make a big difference.
Thanks, JT.
Mhm.
Okay, so how can we improve the employee experience? So I know employers spend a lot of time focusing on talking about culture and benefits and how great the organization is at the beginning of the employee life cycle. So they're trying to get great talent in. They're talking about, and gloating about all of the fantastic things that their organization does. But that we don't always see that follow through the employee life cycle, right? So we shine this bright shining light on everything when people come in, and then we just kind of cut them loose. So we're going to talk about some strategies you could do, again, not only at that attraction and onboarding section, but also at other stages of the employee life cycle to really make sure that you're trying to keep them engaged and involved throughout their time with your organization. But as we proceed, I want everybody to keep in mind there is no one size fits all approach, right? What works for one organization is not necessarily going to work for another organization. Not all of the things we're going to talk about are going to be the right fit for everybody, but these are meant to be some more cost-effective ways of things that you can make changes within your organization to start impacting employee experience in a positive way. So starting with the front end of the employee experience, the employee life cycle, we're going to talk about attraction and recruitment. So when you're hiring, first thing you're doing is you're putting out that job ad, right? And you're setting those job expectations, again, highlighting the benefits and showcasing your culture. This is a great place to, again, first kind of grab the attention of people that you want to bring into your organization. You want to make sure that your job ads are thorough, they're thought out, they're engaging, but that they're not too long, right? You don't want something so short that you're not giving people the right amount of information, but you don't want something so long that they're not going to be interested in reading it. So trying to kind of find that sweet spot when you're kind of trying to market to your candidates. But one way that's really statistically proven to improve your job ad is to include a salary range. So being that most of you are in Columbus, hopefully you're already familiar with pay transparency acts that are taking place across the state of Ohio. And although I know in Columbus it's not required to actually put the salary range into the job ad, I'm here to tell you that it's a really good idea. Because if you've got people that everybody has in mind what they want to make. And so if the salary listed is too low, they're not even going to apply. So then they're not wasting your time, they're not wasting their time. And if it's in that right range, then they're going to apply. And then at the end of the process that there should be alignment on that key factor already, because that's a big reason why a lot of offers don't go through, is because there's not alignment on the salary. The next thing is technology. So making sure things are mobile friendly, right? If you've got a mobile friendly career site, if it's easy for people to apply. I still remember, earlier in my career when I was applying for jobs, and you were supposed to be able to upload your resume and everything would piece over into the application, but it always pieced over incorrectly. So then you spent 20 minutes copying and pasting everything over, and it was a huge headache. And we're much further from that process now, thankfully, but still making sure that is a smooth and convenient process for people, because again, the easier it is for them to apply, then the more likely people are going to apply. And utilizing an applicant tracking system is a great idea, because most of the time it's going to save you time. You're able to blast things off to multiple job boards. You're able to look at all of your candidates in one place. You can usually communicate with candidates through those systems. And if they're tied through to your payroll, everything just kind of flows through nice and neat. So something to consider if that's not something you're using today. And then looking at your interview process. So again, gone are the days of when it was the company that was scrutinizing the candidate, right? Anymore, the candidate is just as equally scrutinizing an organization when they go on site for an interview. So everybody's trying to make sure that it's the right fit. So it's going to be in your best interest as an organization to make sure that you have prepared properly, right? That you are aware of who's coming in the door, what the role is. You kind of looked at their resume beforehand, that you look like you're kind of put together and prepared as well. A big part of this, personally, I tell people, whoever is going to be part of your interview group, make sure that you're kind of aligned in advance on what your questions are going to be. Your candidates do not want to go from one interviewer to the next answering the same questions over and over. So that's not going to benefit them, because they're going to get bored of talking about the same things, but it's not going to benefit you as an organization either, because you're not utilizing the time appropriately to make sure that you're digging into all the right questions that you want. So getting some alignment from your team, being in strong communication at all stages. It's happened to everybody that you think you're going to have an answer by a certain date and you don't. And that's okay, but tell your candidates that, reach out proactively. Don't make them reach out to you and wonder, am I still in the loop? Am I still in the process? Is someone going to contact me? Every couple of days or so, let them know, hey, just follow on up. There was a little hiccup in the process. It's going to take a little bit longer to arrive at a decision, but you'll know by end of week, right? Just keeping that communication open is going to, again, really improve that candidate process. So next we kind of talk about orientation and onboarding. I'm going to split this into 2 slides. So this first one is going to focus on things you can do before the first day. The next one is going to focus on things you can do the first day and after. But first and foremost, a new hire checklist. If you're not using one today, highly suggest you do. It's just an easy way to keep you on track, while also making sure that all of those intricate details that take place in that onboarding process are being completed, right? Because it does no good for your new hire if they get their computer, they arrive on their first day, everything's great, but then they never got an actual email account set up because somebody forgot to reach out to IT to do that. So sure, they've got the computer, but they can't log in and do anything because their account was never set up. And then that's going to make your new hire just kind of feel like they were forgotten or an afterthought, and that nobody was prepared for them to start. So I can't emphasize enough that the tiny details are really what set an average orientation and onboarding process apart from a great one. Um, so again, getting those checklists so that you make sure that you're setting up the technology, the desk is set up, you've initiated that electronic onboarding if you have it. If you do have it, fantastic. That makes things so much smoother for people coming in because they can just log in, fill out their tax forms, direct deposit, maybe benefits information, and then it all gets captured for you, again, saving you time. If you don't have electronic onboarding, that's okay. My suggestion here would be where you can, create fillable PDF forms and still send them to new hires in advance. That way they can fill out the forms and either send them back to you or at least fill them out and bring them on their first day, because I promise you, nobody wants to spend half of their first day filling out paperwork. It's just not a good experience, right? So we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to fill that out kind of in the comfort of their home, where they have all of their information available, maybe can speak with their partner or their spouse and just get everything in line and sent back over.
The heck was that?
The next thing would be a first day or first week agenda. The reason this is fantastic is because it sets expectations for employees. So I know I mentioned earlier about the expectation setting, but the reason this is important is because most people have those first day jitters, right? They're a little bit anxious. They're not sure what to expect. So if you can provide them with, even if it's just the first day, I know the first week can be a little bit lofty and a little bit harder to do depending on the role. But if you can do that for at least the first day, then when employees are coming in, they know, oh, okay, I need to be here at this time. Oh, the team's going to take me out to lunch, so I don't need to pack a lunch, et cetera, et cetera. They know maybe who they're going to be speaking with, so they can just kind of level set a little bit more. And that usually tends to make people feel a little bit more comfortable. And it tells them that you're prepared for them, right? So they know, oh, they've thought about this in advance. They know what they want me to do. The last thing I would consider is a mentor or a buddy assignment. So figuring out if there's somebody on the team, somebody on a different team, somebody other than the manager who can kind of be that mentor or that buddy for that person, and kind of, clearing it with them and making that assignment in advance, because that just gives new hires somebody else to ask questions to maybe talk to if they're having issues with a system or issues, logging in or whatever, and they don't have to constantly feel like they're bothering their new manager.
Mhm.
Okay. So after that, we get to the first day, right? So this is where, again, they're still going to have some of those general orientation things, right? Reviewing your key policies and procedures. Those are all super important things. So making sure that you're doing time for that. But making that team introduction. So a lot of people stay at jobs based on the teams that they work with, right? They have great coworkers or they have a great boss, whatever that is. So trying to build that camaraderie early is important. So making sure that you're introducing the team, if you're able to, going out to lunch with the team or maybe ordering lunch in, just doing something again to try to make that first day special and connecting on a more personal level. So again, those relationships can kind of be built early and will hopefully withstand the duration of the person's time there at the organization. On here, I have like a welcome gift, welcome note. So I've worked with a lot of my clients on their engagement surveys, but I've also talked with, in this position and past positions, I've talked a lot with people about their onboarding process and people that go through the onboarding process, and just sitting down candidly and getting feedback. Like, what did you like about your orientation process? What didn't you like? The things that, again, stick out the most are these tiny details that sometimes get overlooked. So when organizations give people swag, right? So they go to their desk and on their first day, they see, maybe they've got a mug and some pens or a sweatshirt or something at the organization that, again, helps them feel connected early on. Those are things that I've gotten a lot of feedback from, things that just people like. But one of the big ones is a note, a handwritten note. So I need to specify, because this is so much different than an email. It's easy to shoot off an email and those are great too. But I've heard people say, when I started on my first day, my upline manager had handwritten me a note about how excited they were for me to be part of the company, and that meant so much to me. And that's something that they remembered like long after the fact. So those are the things that really resonate with people, and that doesn't cost you much at all, right? So again, going back to some of those cost-effective measures of ways that you can really touch your employees and make those experiences so positive, can be as simple as writing a handwritten note. Also, again, you want to make sure that they're getting in line with their training and goal setting. Whenever you can help people early on set their goals, towards that of the organization, they're going to start feeling that value up front that they're bringing, and they're going to understand how they lend to it. So we'll talk a little bit more about, the goals and the performance a little bit later. But doing that up front, right? You don't have to wait till somebody's been there for a year to set goals. You can set goals day one for something they can complete during their introductory period, so they have things to work towards and achieve. And then setting up those regular check-ins, right? Having regular cadence conversations about how things are going, how can we help you? That's, again, just an extra touch that you can do that's not going to cost you anything except a little bit of your time to make sure that people are just feeling supported and they have the things that they need. So then we move over to engagement and well-being. So here's a list of a lot of things that you can do. Again, it's just a matter of what you're able to implement at your workplace and what makes sense for you. So again, we mentioned that the flexible hours, the hybrid remote work options don't always work for everybody, but that is something that a lot of people are looking for now that does really benefit them. But if you're not able to do that, again, here's some other things, right? So two big ones are encouraging the use of paid time off and respecting boundaries. Again, going back to some of those things that I had mentioned, doing those engagement surveys for some of my clients, something that comes up a lot is, people feel a little bit pressured to be at work all the time. So to answer their emails even when they're at home, or to be checking their email when they're on vacation. That is a super easy way that you can add a ton of value to your organization, just by those two things alone. So when people are on vacation, let them be on vacation. Have somebody else, cover that job for them so they can actually take the time off and rest and rejuvenate and come back ready to go. And respecting their boundaries. At the end of the day, when I close down, I go home, I want to be with my family, right? I don't want to be answering emails and doing all of those things. So working at a place that I do where that is not an expectation is fantastic, because I know that I've got a strict boundary of when I'm at work, and when I'm at home, I'm at home. And that allows me to reset every day and just kind of come back in. And was definitely going to submit, or add more to like the mental health, right? And making people feel, again, that they're valued. Going along with that, though, again, promoting breaks. A lot of times people anymore, they just sit at their desk for their lunches, or they just sit at their desk for their breaks, but encourage people to actually close down and take a few minutes. Those breaks are for a reason, and it's to help people kind of reset throughout the day. So setting a culture and those expectations of actually taking the time to take care of yourself is going to be what goes a long way. It's one thing to say that, but again, it's another thing to do it. So making sure that as leaders of your organization, you're doing the same thing, right? So you are taking your paid time off, you're taking breaks, you're respecting boundaries and having people respect your boundaries. When your team sees you do that, they feel that it's safe for them to do that too. A couple other things you can do: walking meetings. I know people at other companies that, they don't, instead of having the meeting inside, they go have a meeting outside at a picnic, or they walk around the block for their one-on-ones. Just, again, super simple things that you can be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to that, when it comes to respecting boundaries or having flexible hours and schedules, there's a lot of employees, a lot of people who have whether it's a side gig or if there's a hobby that they partake in. And I always use myself as an example. I coach basketball here in Columbus at Centennial High School on the side. So right around 5:30 in the evenings, I'm at school. We're at practice. We have games in the evening. And AHOLA has been very supportive of that, right? I have my time between 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, going to about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, to where I am with clients, where I am taking meetings, or I'm speaking with people like Tina about clients that we have. Right around that 5:30 time, I'm able to step away from my job and do something I truly love, and that's coaching basketball, being in the community. They truly encourage that, and it does go a long way, coming from an employer to an employee.
Definitely. Thanks, JT. So just some more stats for you here around like formal training programs, because that's what we're going to talk about next. So although a lot of the respondents of a State of HR survey said that they believed, that upskilling and reskilling was super important, it turns out that, 55% have no formal employee training programs, 30% have no plans to offer more options for career advancement, and only 17% had planned to offer any training courses through a learning management system. So not fantastic, right? Especially when you're looking to develop and grow your employees. This is something that I hear a lot of is again, a challenge for small organizations is, look, my staff, they want training, they want development. I can't afford these big programs. Like, what am I supposed to do? Because they want to keep their employees, right? They want to keep them happy, but it can be costly to do, big training programs or to pay for someone's certification. We're talking hundreds of dollars, if not more, for the training programs to actually pass those certifications. So a couple of options. One is career pathing. And I think that when people hear this, they think, oh, the career path goes up, 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 up the ladder, right? That's only one option, right? So you're going to have some people that are that ladder climber, right? They want to climb the company ladder, they want to go up. But you're going to have plenty of people that don't want to do that. They don't want to be managers, they don't want to be executives. They might be happy right where they are, and they want to maybe move laterally, move to a different part of your organization and see how that works, or even just gain more depth and breadth in their own role and become true subject matter experts. But the only way you're going to know is by having a career conversation with them. And so I mark this very distinct as being different from a performance conversation, because it's not the same thing. So a career conversation is more of that one-on-one between an employee and their manager about, look, where do you want to go? What do you want to do in your career? What interests you? And actually just showing that interest in your employees, again, is going to go a really long way. Because maybe they want to do a stretch assignment in another department, right? Or maybe they want to job shadow a different area just to learn something new. So just having some of those regular conversations, once or twice a year, making sure that you're in alignment with them on what they want, but helping to remove maybe some of those barriers or blockers that might be in the way. Again, maybe they want to start segueing over this way, so you can make an introduction for them, or they're interested in a particular topic and you know somebody in that industry, right? Even just making those introductions can really show that you're invested and interested in your employees. Training in and of itself can, again, include more formal things like, training programs or certification programs and those types of things, but don't discount some of the smaller things like peer learning, right? And so the reason I bring this up is because you might have somebody in your workplace that is a subject matter expert, a guru in something. Maybe somebody is fantastic at Excel and everybody else is going to him saying, hey, can you help me with this Excel problem or that Excel problem? Why not set up an opportunity for that person, maybe through a lunch and learn or a different avenue, to teach anybody that's interested some basics on Excel, right? And it can be any topic. But you've got a group. You wouldn't have these people in your organization if they weren't smart, if they weren't talented. So, right, lean into that a little bit. And where there's opportunities for them to kind of share their knowledge with the rest of the organization, maybe create an opportunity for them to do that. And also cross-training. So this goes back to the previous slide when we were saying, look, respect boundaries, make sure when people take time off that they can actually take the time off uninterrupted. The way you do that is through cross-training, right? And making sure that other people know how to do other people's jobs to support them, and to give them that opportunity to, again, take time off. Or when things get really busy, then there's other people that can step in. And then you're not going to have any gaps in your productivity, gaps in the service that you're providing, because you've made sure on the back end, you've got everybody kind of lined up and teed up, ready to go. The performance review process, again, this can be formal and informal, and I encourage both. So definitely once or twice a year doing some type of formal performance review, but having regular one-on-one feedback conversations. Maybe that's once a week, maybe that's once a month. It can look different depending on the department, depending on the people themselves and what kind of support they need. But setting those types of things up, just again, to show that you're invested, that you're checking in, that you're making sure that they're okay. Usually at the start of those conversations, you're having a little bit of that personal back and forth, right? And again, just making sure that you're expressing you have general interest in your employees and their overall well-being. Like JT said, just like, hey, how's fatherhood treating you? How's the new baby? Just checking in really makes people feel that sense of belonging in your organization, which is going to make them want to stay. But on top of that, I want to make it a point to mention that at no time should there be like a performance review that is negative that somebody was not prepared for. If that happens, if you deliver a negative performance review, and that person is shocked, then the manager is not doing their job correctly, right? That should never come as a surprise, because as I'm saying, there should be these regular conversations throughout the year. So people should know if they're not meeting expectations, if they're not performing, and they should know that in advance of a formal performance review. That should not be the first time that they're hearing that. And again, that's going to be something that is going to be more likely to set somebody on the path to succeed if you're letting them know that information as soon as the performance starts slipping, as opposed to when it's already a huge problem. And then going back to that goal setting we talked about earlier, right? So this is going to be what ties people to your organization. Where possible, I'm sure your organizations have, again, high level organizational goals and metrics that they're trying to meet. But how does that trickle down to each of the departments? And then how does that trickle down to the individual employees at your organization, where they can set goals that tie into the team goal and then into the overall organizational goal? They're going to see how what they're doing adds value. And they're going to be more likely to help you achieve that goal. One, when they know what it is and you're communicating it. And two, when they can see how one piece feeds into the next. Okay, so then we have motivation and retention. So for recognition programs, that's kind of an obvious one. These are things that we hear about all the time. But one thing you can consider that might be different from what you're doing today is a peer-to-peer recognition. So sometimes it's hard, managers are pulled in a bunch of different directions. They might not always see what's happening in the day-to-day, but providing some peer recognition opportunities where people can say, hey, this person really stepped in from this other department and helped me out. Again, gives people an opportunity to take part in that recognition, and they're more likely to feel recognized as well. Because if you've got someone that's a little bit more introverted, they might get a little bit more unnoticed than somebody who's out there being very boisterous about the things that they're doing. Thank you cards, again, can't harp on this enough. This comes up time and time and time again when I look at engagement data and how people want to be recognized. And it is probably the one that comes up the most, which shocks people. I mean, aside from a pay increase, because everybody wants that and they're always going to throw that out there, but a handwritten thank you card, from their manager, from the CEO, from somebody in the organization that says, I see you, I appreciate what you're doing, keep up the good work, we're so happy to have you here. It goes so much further than you think it does. Celebrating work anniversaries, birthdays, company wins. Before you do anything with birthdays, I always encourage clients to check in with their employees and make sure that, one, that they celebrate birthdays, and two, that they want that recognized, because not everybody does. And so making sure that you kind of get that consent before recognizing that. But those can be simple ways to just kind of motivate and engage people. Again, we've talked about applying those policies consistently and fairly. When you're not doing that, you're going to kind of create those disgruntled employees who are going to be upset about not being treated the same as somebody else. But again, hopefully, if you've done some of these other things and you've created that culture where people feel comfortable talking, then they're going to go ahead and feel comfortable saying something about it and at least letting you know. Stay interviews are important. We'll talk about that in a second. One big one I want to talk about here is the last one. So these town hall meetings and transparent company communication. This is really big. Because if you're willing to share things like financial information, how the company is doing overall, people are going to start to trust your organization, right? And they're going to feel that loyalty that they might not otherwise. So, I've worked with some clients who unfortunately had to do some reductions in force, right? But because they had these monthly town hall meetings and they were sharing, I mean, it was kind of something that employees could see, right? That unfortunately, because of market or whatever the situation was, things were not trending the way that they should have, right? Like numbers were not hitting, sales were not hitting, things were not going according to plan. So at least when those conversations happened, it wasn't out of the blue, right? It was not a happy conversation to have, but people understood because they had seen over time how things were trending, and at least they were prepared for it. And it was an organization where, again, they at least had that trust and understanding. So whenever you can share those types of things with your team, again, they're going to feel more valued.
Yeah, and the company town halls are, extremely important. We partake in them here at Ahola. They're actually the last Thursday of every month that we, partake in them. The owner of the company is involved in it, so it's not like it's, just management or it's just sales or it's just operations. It's an entire company where we all block off our schedules for about an hour at 9 o'clock every morning, and we get together and we recognize people's anniversaries. We recognize birthdays. We recognize some huge wins that we've had as a company over the last month, to keep everybody on the same page, to make sure everyone's still engaged. And of course, like Tina mentioned, we'll go over financials and say, hey, this is where we're lacking at right now. This is where we could see some improvement. So no one's left in the dark as to how the company's doing or what the next steps are that we're going to be taking. But again, it's something that is encouraged and required that we all get to so we can all remain on that same page.
Absolutely. So we started at the onboarding, kind of end here at the offboarding, right? So we've come full circle with the employee life cycle. Still things you can do at this stage to, again, make sure people have a good experience. Doing exit interviews, this is more of a way for you to kind of get some information and just make sure that you're understanding why people are leaving, and information that you might be able to apply to, again, some of those earlier stages we talked about. Just as I talked about an onboarding checklist, you can have an offboarding checklist, making sure you're collecting the property, disabling accounts, providing a separation letter, any other documentation that might need to be provided to an employee when they leave. Again, you don't want to have to reach out to somebody 2 months down the line and remember that you forgot to collect a headset from them that you gave them, right? That's not a great look. So you want to make sure that you're collecting everything up front, you're giving them what they need up front, you're handling that process appropriately, making sure they get their paycheck when the state says that they need to get that final paycheck, and just making sure everything's in accordance. But finally, the transition plan. So if you have somebody who resigns and they give you that 2-week or more notice, definitely taking the time to work with them to transition any projects that they might have to somebody else. That's going to help, especially in small organizations, again, where people are going to feel that pressure a little bit more when somebody leaves. It's going to help make things a little bit smoother, because then there's a better handoff of that baton from, one person to the next, to whomever's going to take on those projects, those clients, those accounts, what have you. So people know, again, what to expect moving forward and make that a little bit of a cleaner process. Okay, and then finally, I want to talk a little bit about measuring that employee experience. So, HR has a ton of metrics. So some of those that you can see, time to fill, absenteeism, productivity, retention rates, these are super important, but on their own don't tell the whole story, right? So it's important to keep track of these metrics, because over time, if you see, the time to fill starting to get longer, or your retention rates getting higher, productivity rates not going in the right way, that can be an indicator of a problem, but it's not going to tell you what the problem is. And so that's where we get some of these other areas, right? These surveys, these deep dives, and that's where we kind of start to uncover that information. So a new hire survey, I would encourage this, maybe after that first week, or maybe after the onboarding process, talking to your new hires. What did they like about orientation and onboarding? What did they not? Again, simple ways that you can make improvements. You can also do that just across your whole organization with general engagement surveys, pulse surveys, feedback surveys, trying to understand what it is that they're interested in and the things that would make work better for them. But again, that only goes so far, because you're going to have some people that don't fill them out, or whatever the situation might be. I think where you're really going to get the content that you're looking for on the things that you can do at your organization to drive the employee experience are going to be these deep dive opportunities. Sitting down specifically for stay interviews while people are there, or just general focus groups. Maybe it's not focused on why do you stay here, but just sitting down with a smaller group of people. You don't want to do this with necessarily the whole organization, right? You want people to feel comfortable talking. So in smaller groups or one-on-one, and just asking them questions, what works well, what do you like? What would make the employee experience better for you? What have you seen other places that you think we could do here? And just kind of understanding, again, I mentioned an HR conference that I went to, and one of the presenters had mentioned, I worked at a company, we had fantastic benefits. We were paying people well above market rate. We had a fantastic training program in general for the organization. People were still leaving, and we didn't know why. And they sat down and they asked why. And it turns out because that first level line of managers were not getting the training that they needed, so they were assuming, oh, Jonathan is fantastic at his job, he'll be a great manager, but they never gave Jonathan training on how to be a manager. And Jonathan had never trained before, or I had never managed before. So the company didn't set him up for success. And so then he was just kind of, flying by the seat of his pants, just doing what he thought was best in those situations, but that wasn't helping the employees. And so that gave them that insight, so they could then go and develop that first line manager training, making sure they had the soft skills, making sure they knew how to do performance reviews. They knew how to conduct conversations around discipline and coaching, that they knew what the policies were that they were managing to, right? And so those are, again, just another example of how you have to kind of go back and talk to your employees and get some of that information to make sure that you're fixing the right things, to improve that experience and get people to want to stay. Some ongoing ones could be, suggestion boxes where maybe people can provide that anonymous feedback, and then just general open door policies, right? The ultimate goal is you get to a point where people feel comfortable enough to just come talk to you when something doesn't feel right or something goes wrong or something that they say, hey, you know what? I saw this somewhere else. Maybe we can try this here. And just being able to have that open conversation, that's really the ultimate goal, is to get to that point. Because this is never a one and done. You will always be coming back to this. You should always be measuring. You should always be having conversations, because your employee experience and your culture is ever going to be changing. Even if you kept everything the same, just by having different people, it's going to change. So as you add to your organization and people leave, again, things will organically change. So you always want to kind of keep that finger on the pulse. But finally, a few key takeaways from what we've covered here. Again, the employee experience takes place over the entire employee life cycle, and it's not going to be changed overnight. So like I said, just kind of buckle down, get ready, because it's going to be something that's going to take some time and keep going. As we mentioned here today, there's plenty of cost-effective things you can do. Obviously, some things are still going to cost money, but these were meant to be some things that you can apply or do that are going to be very low cost or minimal or no cost for your organization. But the ultimate thing, again, listen to your employees, right? If you ask them, they will tell you. But then be prepared to do something with it. So if you are going to take some of these steps and you're going to try to implement some things and improve this process, and you're asking for feedback, you better make sure you're doing something about it, because nothing's going to hurt that experience more than if you ask them for the feedback and you don't actually do anything with it. Can you do something about everything? Of course not. Right. But just, again, going back to that transparent communication for the organization, being open about that, telling them, hey, we heard everybody wants 5% raises. Unfortunately, we can't do that because we've been talking to you month after month and you see the finances. And unfortunately, we're just not there this year. But this is something that we hear you, and something we're going to think about for the future, whatever it might be. But just even acknowledging that you heard them is going to go a long way. So hopefully this gave you some ideas of things that you can do for your organization. But I'm going to go ahead and kick it back over to JT.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Tina, for the presentation and the wealth of knowledge that you provide in this area. Now, Ahola, we mentioned it at the beginning. We do cover services from the entire life cycle of employee, from hire to retire. And then, of course, we've, as of last year, unveiled a service called our Proactive Direct Service, where Tina and her team are able to engage with clients who are not enrolled in our payroll service. Maybe you do enjoy your payroll provider. You do enjoy how that process has been going over the years that you've been utilizing it, but you would like to see some interaction amongst a professional HR consultant, possibly from Ahola, with yourself or an HR coordinator you have on your team, to provide you with some ideas on what it's like to, how do we increase employee retention? How do we get some better job descriptions? How do we better illustrate our employee handbook and make sure that it's acknowledged by our employees, so that they know all of the policies that are in place with the company? Both of these are options that all Columbus Chamber members are afforded to. We are part of the savings program with the Chamber. So I would love to, have anyone who has, had their interest sparked by this conversation that Tina and I have had with you today, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to get Tina or a member of her team on a call, and we can, discuss and see where your business is at, see where it is that we can make some improvements or add value to your business, so that the employee experience with your company is something that you're proud of on a day-to-day basis. So again, I'm James Turner. Tina was here on the call with me. Thank you again, Tina, for your contribution today. And to the Columbus Chamber, thank you so much for having us. As always, we enjoy being a partner with you. And I'll kick it back over to Kelly.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is a great presentation, and lots of conversation to be had as a follow-up. Just one quick comment to everybody on the call. You will receive, as a follow-up from us at the Chamber, a link to this PowerPoint presentation. So please know that that's coming to you as well. A couple comments, around the town halls, very supportive of that. Those can be incredibly effective. And Jasmine Elliott also let us know that they allow their employees to submit questions prior, so that the leadership can probably best prepare, those answers and responses. We did have a question as well can you provide some examples of peer-to-peer recognition programs that are effective?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'll start off, and then Tina, you can add on. this is going to be an ironic thing that I mentioned here, but we have an award through AHOLA that's called the Pillar Awards. So we have different standards or different values within the company that we like to recognize individuals for based on their performance each month, each quarter, and throughout the year. And ironically enough, the first one I was able to pull up was Tina was awarded a Pillar Award back in April for innovation, perseverance, resourcefulness, and teamwork. So this is something that we're able to recognize our employees for at an ongoing rate. We have a service called Share and Perform that we utilize as well, that employees are able to openly message and send notes to different employees saying, hey, I saw that you had this big win today. Congratulations. Or recognizing somebody such as Tina for, hey, it was a great webinar we had with the Columbus Chamber. And I can share that throughout our entire company for everyone to see the message. And you're able to just post those throughout the course of the day, the week, or the year, just to make sure you're recognizing the people you work with. And again, it goes back to the culture part of the business, to where people feel welcome, people feel recognized, people feel seen, and they're not just a number in a machine, right? They're not one of 500 or one of 83 like what we have at AHOLA. You're part of the, we're a family owned business, so you're part of the family. You are part of AHOLA, and you feel welcome. You it makes you want to come back to work every day.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, some other things that we've seen, or like with some of my clients, sometimes they might do. So JT mentioned what we do is monthly, and people can submit at any time. I've got some clients that do things that are more like annual awards, right? Like they might have an
Mhm.
annual teamwork award, or they might have an annual productivity award, whatever it is, right? But people can submit nominations for like an award banquet that they do at the end of the year when they're recognizing and doing some of their training and those types of things. I've also seen people do not necessarily year round, but periodically, like an appreciation wall where they will just
Mhm.
like leave out little cards and people can write something and they'll put it up there. And those are kind of cool because you can see it and you can watch it grow, right? So it might start with a couple people writing how they appreciate somebody, but then it grows and grows and grows. And it's nice to see that visual along with just knowing, I mean, again, because when you're submitting something, it kind of goes and it disappears, but like just again, relating those like to the thank you cards, having something tangible and seeing it hits people a little bit differently in a positive way.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree with you more on kind of the power of those handwritten cards. I have a whole drawer full that I've amassed over almost 8 years here at the chamber, and it does make you feel good every once in a while to take it out and just kind of read a card from someone to say they were expressing their appreciation or gratitude. So I think that, those obviously are very meaningful. I did have a really quick question of my own, if you don't mind. Tina, you mentioned being at the conference and, kind of talking about when you have maybe an individual whose toxicity within the organization is even more noticed when they're gone, that the morale has lifted. Do you have any strategies or any ideas for organizations who, let's say they've been through that individual is no longer with the organization? How do you reorient your teams and kind of recognize what had happened, and kind of help people recover and rebound from something like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really kind of dependent on like what the situation was, right? If
Sure.
somebody resigns on their own versus somebody being terminated, like that can lead to like different types of conversations.
Yeah.
And again, I think a lot of it just kind of happens organically, and I think it tells more of a story at that point because even the organization might not be quite as aware of the impact that a particular individual may have had until they are gone, right? And people just
Right.
kind of like breathe that like sigh of relief almost that they're gone. I mean, I think I would treat it just similar to how if anybody leaves an organization, right? Again, you have to figure out, okay, that person's gone now. So is that person being replaced? Are people assuming those job duties? What does that look like? And just kind of like rallying people back together and just kind of having those conversations. Again, depending on the situation, it might make sense to have more intimate conversations around circumstances, and in other cases it might not. So I think it's really going to be situation specific, which isn't a fantastic answer for you, Kelly. But I think it's going to be very just dependent on what the scenario was. But again, just making sure that people continue to feel supported. I can't stress enough just even telling people, hey, my door's open. If there's something you want to talk about, come let me know. If there's anything that I can do, any barriers that I can remove for you. And then it's going to be so much more natural for people to do that if you've already baked in those regular one-on-one conversations throughout the year, right? Again, whether they're weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever it might be, if you already have those set up, um, it's going to be more natural for people to kind of share like how they feel, like, wow, things are really different now, or oh, this feels very different because of what happened or whatever. And it's going to make it more natural for them to have that conversation than maybe if you don't have some of those strategies in place already.
No, that was perfect. I thank you. I thank you for that answer and those comments. I think that that addressed it very well. It's again reinforcing that whole establishing those relationships and open communication and letting people know that you're accessible and they can approach you, whether there's a concern or an idea that they want to put forward. As always, the time with you guys always goes so quickly. You have such great information to share with all of us, and we're incredibly appreciative. Thank you, Tina and JT, and everyone at AHOLA for continuing to bring all this great content to us through our Business Edge series. We hope everyone on the call today has a great rest of your day, and please come back and see us again soon at another Chamber of Commerce event. Everyone take good care.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.